In this video, I want to discuss your camera's 4 metering modes. This video is going to be Canon specific, so I'm going to be using Canon terms. In Canon cameras, there's 4 modes that they use for metering. You have evaluative metering, partial metering, spot metering, and center weighted metering. The reason why understanding your metering modes is so important is the fact that cameras are built with their own light meter inside the camera. So when you're looking through the viewfinder, you're going to see an exposure index, and there's going to be an exposure mark. And depending on if the scene is a darker exposure, that index mark is going to be to the left. And if the image is overexposed, that index mark is going to be over to the right. Well, with your metering mode, it helps your camera understand the scene better to be able to recommend the proper exposure. Let's first start with evaluative metering. Evaluative metering takes metering of the whole scene. So let's say you're on a beach and there's no trees, nothing around. It's pretty much an even exposure, and there's a family out there that you're taking photos of. Evaluative metering is the metering to use in that scene because the whole entire scene is evenly lit. And so it's going to recommend the correct exposure for that scene. Now, if you were to use partial metering, in a Canon camera, partial metering is where it takes metering from the center of the image, the center of the viewfinder. Canon actually says 6.5% of that center of the image is used for metering. So let's say you're in a situation where your subjects are backlit. It's early afternoon, the sun is starting to fall behind them, and the overall scene is exposed correctly. It's a brighter scene, but your subject is darker now because the light is coming in from behind them and there's no light filling in your subject. So your subject's going to be darker than the scene behind them. If you were to take a photo with the evaluative metering, it's metering for the background. So the background will be perfectly exposed, but your subject is going to be dark. So you would use partial metering and meter off of your subject, and therefore your subject will be properly exposed, and the background, unfortunately, will be overexposed somewhat. The next metering mode is spot metering. Spot metering is like partially metering, but it's even finer. It's more laser-like. It takes a very small point in the center and it meters off of that. So if you're taking a picture of something very small and it is underexposed, yet the background is very exposed, you want to use spot metering for that instance. And then center weighted average metering takes a larger center and averages it out to meter for the subject or to meter for the scene. Of the 4 metering modes, I typically use evaluative metering and partial metering based upon the situations that I find myself shooting in with portrait photography. It might be different from you, but hopefully this gives you a good basis as to an understanding why you need to understand metering modes and how they work. Thanks again for watching this video, and as always, happy shooting.